wider confidence level in Donald Trump than African Americans, and why it's almost 50% have confidence in Donald Trump.
Welcome, everyone. Gabriel Buelna, Buelna News.
Our guest today is Maria Elena Durazo, accomplished labor leader and California State Senator representing District 24. Hello, Maria Elena. Thanks for joining us today. How are you doing? I'm
great. Good to be with you, Gabriel.
Oh, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure. And are you at home right now?
Yes, I am. I'm following the directions, not like Newport Beach.
Okay, I don't think we have a beach in the hills of Northeast Los Angeles, but let's get right into things. So women in leadership. In the last 2 decades, women have taken on more of leadership roles than ever before. What was your motivation to be a leader?
My motivation to be a leader was another woman who was doing the kinds of things that really I found to be very exciting and very challenging and very much teaching us to stand up for our rights. So one of those first women was Soledad Alatorre, who was an organizer, immigrant worker organizer back when I was in college. But she kind of put this thing in my mind about what we could be doing as women, the skills that women have, the vision, the way we do things, the culture that women bring. So I just look back at every time there's a woman there saying something. Dolores Huerta. I mean, there's so many women around me that I've been lucky to plant the seed. So when the time came up, I could make a decision.
So speaking of Dolores Huerta, on this channel, Dolores Huerta suggested that you would make a good running mate to former Vice President Joe Biden. So if you were asked, would you accept the invitation to be the vice presidential candidate for the Democratic Party?
Well, I think that's impossibility. But here's what I would say. The most important thing is Joe Biden going to talk about the issues that we care about? And is he going to come into our barrios? Is he going to come into our towns? Is he going to come into our cities? And that's what we as Latinos need to challenge him to do, because he's not going to take us for granted. We won't let him take him for granted, even if Trump is the other candidate.
So we'll come back to that question. So earlier this week, Smerconish analyst on CNN published one of my articles on who will Latinos vote for in the 2020 election, Joe Biden or Donald Trump. I cited a few statistics. In 2016, 47.6% of eligible Latinos voted compared to 65.3% of whites, 59.6% for African Americans, and 49% of Asians. There's an old adage that says, oh, if only Latinos voted. That is, the response is more nuanced. So what is your response when people say that Latinos don't vote?
Well, I would say that we need to have a lot more organizations out there that will challenge our community to vote. In my experience, just in changing the city of LA, and which in turn led to changing the state of California, we had strong, tough conversations. I've been in the middle of the change in Nevada. I was in the middle of the change in Arizona. That happened because we didn't treat our, Latino voters and our Latino neighbors and community. We didn't treat them in a way that was very soft. We were strong. We want them to be strong, and we want them to go vote. And we challenged them in a very tough way. It's like we used in one of our campaigns in LA. We had a picture. This was in 2005. We had a picture of a couple, like from a rural area in Mexico, getting on a train, and you could see them with their little cajitas and bolsas and making the trip up north. And what we said was, es imperdonable that people before us, our ancestors, came to this country for a better life with the demand that we have the same rights as everybody else, and that we don't exercise our right to vote. It's that kind of conversation we need to have, because this whole thing of, it's the same old, first of all, it's not true. And second of all, we have the power in our hands to do something about it. So I say that our approach has to be, stronger and firm and inspiring at the same time.
In a new poll by Latino Decisions released this past Friday, Latino support for Biden seems to be softening. So the poll states in the national poll released on April 24th, 1,200 Latinos were interviewed. 59% state they will vote for or are leaning towards Joe Biden, with 18% undecided. When asked if they would be more likely or less likely to support Democrat Joe Biden if he selects Nevada Senator Catherine Cortez Masters, the first Latina ever elected to the U.S. Senate, as his vice presidential running mate, 67% of respondents stated that they would. When asked, would you feel more or less enthusiastic and motivated to turn out and vote in November if Joe Biden selected a Latina, such as Catherine Cortez Mosado, for his vice presidential running mate? 72% of respondents stated that they would be more likely to turn out to vote. So as vice president of the Democratic National Committee, how is the Democratic Party going to make up for a potential dip in enthusiasm for Joe Biden, and is a Latina running mate important, especially because in swing states, the numbers are thin and Latino voting increase could make a difference? What are your thoughts?
Well, of course, I think that having a Latina as vice presidential candidate would add to the inspiration of going out to vote. But I don't think that's the only thing that matters as far as Latino turnout. I think what really matters is how strong is Biden going to be with the issues that we care about. So I've seen, whether you have a Latino running or not, of course that's important to us. There's no doubt about it. I'm not going to lessen the importance of that. But we need to have those that are going to be true to their word. We need to have those that are going to be willing to come into our communities, walk and talk in our communities, and really be committed to our communities. That's what matters. Bernie Sanders, who would ever think an older white guy from Vermont would get the support that he got from the Latino community? He got it because he was in our communities. He was in our neighborhoods, and he built a cadre, just like President Obama. He built a ground operation in many, many states to be able to win those votes over. So yeah, more Latinos need to vote, no doubt about it. We need to give them a reason to go vote. But what do we care about? We care about the fact that we're excluded from things like a $1,200 check from the federal government. That's outrageous. That's outrageous. So we're gonna work hard. Vice President Biden, who will become our candidate for president, he's gonna work hard. We're all gonna work hard to make sure he does what he needs to do to motivate that vote, and then we're going to do on the ground what it takes to mobilize that vote.
Does the party have a specific strategy to outreach to Latino electorates with regard to spending and doing what Bernie Sanders did, which was hire leaders, spend in the community? Bernie Sanders did not depend on Latino leadership. He went direct into the community. In your opinion, being the leadership, does the Democratic Party have what it takes right now to get that done?
Well, we didn't wait until it got down to Biden to be the presidential nominee for the Democrats. We've been working at this for several years. It used to be that the National Democratic Party really didn't do didn't do a whole lot until it came to the national election. What we've been doing for the last 3 years has been building up the infrastructure in states and in regions all over the country. And there are areas where there are Latino voters, areas where there are African-American voters, areas where there are white voters. It's to build up the infrastructure. We've been helping to elect from the ground up, from school districts to state to federal. So it's been working because we're partnered also with organizations like in labor, with women's groups, with LGBT groups. And those partnerships, plus a ground operation for these in-between elections, is building up an infrastructure. You can't do that in 2 or 3 months. It takes 3 or 4 years to build that. And that then, even though it wasn't exclusively aimed just at Latinos, it was aimed at where we need to get the vote out in order to win, no matter who the candidate was. So I feel like we're now going to take the last steps, the last phase to actually elect our nominee.
Thank you. When you ran for state senate, your theme was resist. How do you turn resist into beat Donald Trump, especially in swing states where Trump can be defeated?
Well, you have to have people on the ground. You have to have people on the ground who will not take no for an answer. You have to, it can't just be the slogan. I think there are a lot of people out there that like to, raise their fist up in the air, or those that like to complain about Donald Trump. And then there are those who like to work really, really hard for to defeat Donald Trump. That is what's really important, is defeat Donald Trump. And making sure that our message and our operation on the ground is set up to really go after and keep pushing hard for our voters to get out.
Moving on to voter suppression. Will the country be ready for mail-in voting in November? And what's the Democratic Party doing to address the issue? And how will it address the large segments of the Latino electorate that don't vote by mail, let alone trust the mail process?
Well, we're going to do all we can to make sure that there's the option not only of the mail, but actually another way, because I think there are clearly parts of the country that only want, that don't want mail and only want in person. They want to keep us from using that right to be able to do it by mail. So I think we're watching out. We're getting involved in those parts of the country that won't give people, the option. And you can tell Republicans don't want us to have a vote by mail in many places. So we're watching out for those places where we're deeply involved in whatever legal issues we have at our disposal. And we know that it's taken us time here in California over several years to build up the notion of let's vote by mail. But we still have a lot of Latinos who say, no, yo quiero ir en persona, and then there are those who've gotten used to, we can do it at home. So I think we've got a lot of work to do, by the way. It's kind of, look, we're going through a census right now. And that census is showing, for example, in my district, that only 41% of the people in my district were the least responsive to the census in the whole state of California. The second least responsive is Holly Mitchell's district, which borders with mine. We've got a lot to do to build up, our community's motivation to do things by mail. They are responding, they are becoming better at it, but there's still those who say, no, I want to go in person.
So going a little deeper into that question, and you just said, for all the sacrifice that generations made to make things better for us, would you say it's an obligation for voters everywhere, not just in swing states, to go out of their way to make sure and vote in November?
Absolutely. Look at this. Look what we're involved in right now. Yes, people have to see it as now life and death. How many lives would have been saved had there been a smart, compassionate, strategic president in the White House? Someone who cared about everybody, someone who had relationships internationally, who knew how to handle and represent the country in international affairs. If we had somebody like that, there's no doubt in my mind there would be less deaths than there are today because of this pandemic. We need somebody who cares about all of us, We need somebody who's willing to do whatever it takes to protect all of us, not just in his words. So,
Senator, are you trying to say that if Hillary Clinton had won, the country would have been better off right now because she would have reacted better and faster?
No doubt we would be better off. Would we have avoided altogether? I don't think so, not from what I see happening all over the country. But there are small countries that have very, very, very low percentage of cases and deaths. I believe that somebody like Hillary Clinton would have handled this so different and wouldn't have made fun and been sarcastic. And it makes me sick to think that he is the one in charge in this country with all this crisis that's going on around us.
So let's go into something near and dear to your heart: workers. So from meat and poultry and garbage collectors and those dealing with the elderly, Latino immigrants are situated in frontline jobs that are putting them and their families at risk. How should Joe Biden address the growing call, especially from Republican leadership, that employers be exempt from any liability related to COVID-19?
Well, what we have to do is strengthen the ability of working men and women to have access to health care. We have to strengthen that because it affects all of us. Imagine if all the working people had their PPE from the very beginning, not weeks and weeks and weeks later. If they had health insurance, if they were covered and they knew, regardless of your status, regardless of who you were and where you worked, that you knew you were going to be able to go and get tested and be treated without any hesitation, that affected all of us. Mm-hmm. That's a public health concern that would have been met. So instead of going backwards, we've got to go forwards. We've got to make sure every worker in every workplace has the ability to have access to health care. And it's more important, especially if they are essential workers, like farm workers, like grocery workers. But I would say any worker. Look at the manufacturing workers. We're relying on them. Amazon workers. Look what's going on with them. So I would say that healthcare is an issue that needs to be strengthened, not an issue that needs to be weakened without workers' rights, without good pay and good benefits. They need to be strengthened. Let's look at some of the European countries and take our example from those models instead of from weakening our laws.
So this morning, it's been reported that the United States wants to punish China for the coronavirus supposedly starting there. This is one way of public policy developing. What's your vision of how public policy after coronavirus might evolve with regard to workers' rights, the economy, education? Once we're on the other side of this, we don't know what the other side. What does the other side look like?
Well, I think that in the process of making decisions, and we're going to make some very difficult decisions because we're not going to have the same amounts of money at the local, county, and state levels. We do at the federal level, by the way. We have spent trillions of dollars in wars that got us nowhere. So we could easily at the federal level spend trillions of dollars internally to strengthen our ability to have a stronger economy. So for example, we need to continue to work on environmental issues. We need cleaner air, cleaner water, cleaner land. So what do we do about that? What if we have more manufacturing here in this country that creates jobs, but in those factories that should be green built, by the way, that we manufacture electric buses, that we manufacture all the things that will help to make our air cleaner. We could do that. That's our decision. That's nobody else's decision. And we could do that more in a way that will help our economy. It'll create good jobs and it'll clean the air. There's ways of doing that if we have the will. Shame on us if we come out at the end of this with more poor people, with more people without health insurance, with more farm workers who can't get, access to health care, with more kids that don't have digital access, connectivity, the devices that they need. It's up to us. And it's up to us all together to say these are the things we demand. We should not end up with less housing. We should end up with at least the plans, very specifically designed plans to build more affordable housing. Those are things we can do. It's in our control.
Do you think we will be a more activist country after this?
I believe that we will at least be more compassionate in many communities than we had been before. I have a little note here that I saved, and I eventually went down to see her, a couple who lived near me, and they went and gave little leaflets and put it on everybody's door saying, my name is Allison, this is my husband, here's our phone number, please call us. We will do whatever you need, whatever you or your family need, we're here to help you. I mean, those kinds of things didn't happen before the pandemic. I'm hoping that the bad side of some people, gets quieted and gets brushed aside. But I think having a new president like Joe Biden is going to do a lot to bring out more of what's the best in all of us.
So going on to the final subject, Mexico and Latin America. So in reporting on the pandemic, English language media has tended to focus its attention on Europe and Asia, yet relatively little has been mentioned on what's going on in our southern hemisphere. Worse yet, in the scarcity reporting and what is unfolding in Mexico, why is it critical for Los Angeles, or California, and the nation to understand why Mexico is important now more than ever?
Well, Mexico is one of our top trading partners. I mean, if we want to keep the jobs here in this country, so many of them have been created because of our trade relationship with Mexico. We should care about Mexico a lot, whether you, whatever your ideological bent might be, you should care about Mexico because that relationship has created many, many, many jobs in this country. We have a cultural connection with Mexico. The Southwest is, primarily Mexican Americans. We have this historic connection with Mexico. Mexico isn't going away. It's going to continue to be there. And it's in our interest to have that relationship to help Mexico. It has a leader today that is more committed to addressing the issues of poverty. And so we should pay attention to that because the better off they are, then those families don't have to leave. They could stay. They don't want to have to come to the US. They should when they want to, but they don't want to have to because there aren't enough economic opportunities in Mexico. So for all those reasons, we all should care about having the best relationship that we can have with Mexico.
So moving on to Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Are the actions of the Mexican government to the pandemic important to us here in the United States? And what is your assessment of how the Mexican government and President Obrador and how they've been handling? What's your assessment?
Well, from the little time that I have to try to figure out what they are doing in Mexico, it seems to me that compared to us taking on the pandemic, it appeared to be a little bit slower than what we were doing here, at least from the federal leadership. But I understand that there were several states in Mexico that immediately responded and began to, enact measures to address the pandemic. So I think there was a mix of what was going on in terms of Mexico's reaction and response. And look, it's like everything else. This pandemic knows no borders. It doesn't care if you're on that side or this side of the border. It's going to hit, if we allow it to spread, it's going to hit everybody. And so, yes, they're taking care of the people in Mexico while they're there is very important to us being able to have also to helping to stop the spread as in international borders. So I hope that they continue to do take those bolder steps to be able to stop this spread.
So couldn't Joe Biden be clear in developing right now a clear policy related to Latin America? There's 130 million Mexicans in Mexico, plus 36 million here. Europe is across the ocean. So if Mexico and Central America and South America don't work through this pandemic well, it will directly, immediately affect the United States. And there's very little the United States could do to prevent it. But yet the country is sending respirators everywhere but Latin America. There seems to be an issue, and maybe it's cultural, maybe it's the East Coast, that Latin America doesn't exist. Do you see that?
I think there's something within this country that, you know, the West Coast doesn't exist except for certain moments and certain times. We are doing things in this side of the country that should be the model. That should be the model for other states. That should be the model for the country. And yet, because it's California, it's the West Coast, it's ignored. It is ignored, and yet we are so much better off because of our policies. With regards to Mexico, I think it's racism, without a doubt. It's racism that this country does not give Mexico and Latin America and Central America the attention, the support, not to go in and take over, but the support that it needs, real support that it needs to rebuild and to build their economies. And there are other economies in Latin America that we could take notice of and that do well. So I think it's the pure racism that, you know, like somebody tried to say, well, they're all Mexicans, you know, who cares about them? We are the strength, certainly of the Southwest, and in many parts now, a growing number of states in this country. That's why we have to vote more. That's why we have to engage more. That's why we have to go to the streets more. I mean, it's what we have to do.
So Maria Elena Durazo, we've had many shows on Buelna News. Check out our other videos. Thank you very much. Is there anything else that you would like to say?
Well, I just want to hope that everybody stays safe, take the extra precautions. This is an extremely difficult, trying time. It's a jolt in our economy. It's a jolt in our lives. And so please, God bless. Please take care of yourselves.
Maria Elena Durazo, labor leader, state senator, great human being. Thank you very much. Check out our videos, everyone. Have a good rest of the day. Be safe. Thank you.